All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Jen, would you take roll, please?
Commissioner Corbin.
Here.
Commissioner Waldner.
Here.
Commissioner Thill.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson. Mayor Lindsay.
Here. You have before you the agenda for this evening.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Seeing no appearances and acknowledgements, is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Seeing that we're not at 5:35 yet for the hearings on the old business, I'm going to move down to number 4. Authorize the bidding of AIP 3-46-0029-016-2018 Madison Municipal Airport Parallel Taxiway Project. Now, were they going to call in on this?
Yep, we need to call out, so I don't think we want to.
All right, so then we will move on down to number 6. Authorize the mayor to sign the application for the permit to occupy the right-of-way persona south side of Southwest First Street. Chad or Jen, would you want to address that?
I can say a few words, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you. Included in the agenda packet is a permit for application to permit occupation of right-of-way. It says to occupy right-of-way, and a sketch. Neil Gilbertson from Persona had called me and wanted to tie into an existing storm sewer in the right-of-way of Southwest First Street. We've used this instrument before on other similar such applications where people want to tie in their private drainage adjacent to the street into the street storm sewer. So I provided that to Mr. Gilbertson, and he completed the form and provided the attached sketch for this connection. It seems to be pretty straightforward and pretty routine. I would recommend that we approve this, and then I can get back in contact with him and let him know it's acceptable for him to tie into that storm sewer.
They're already tied into it?
Yeah, they are.
They are with some sort of a electric pump. He wants to put in a gravity line so they don't have to pump with a small diameter line every time they get a rain. And so that is a larger connection than they have before.
So are they going to put a drop in that, collects the water and then sends it gravity-wise?
I don't know exactly what they're going to do on their own property.
Mm-hmm.
He has noted here a drain pit. I assume that's what it would be, but it would be the 12-inch gravity flow line that they would be tying into the back of our storm structure.
Other questions or comments?
You might want to check with Amert because they've done a lot of work out there. I don't know what all they done here a few years ago, but I do know that they put storm sewer in on the east side of it. There's no storm sewer that runs past Catherine up there in Southwest First, so.
Yeah, Mr. Gilbertson mentioned that he's been working with Amert on this, and so I know the application was prepared by, I assume that's him signing it here, but they had planned to work with Amert to get it done.
Other questions or comments?
You're all okay, Chad, with them tying into it?
Yes, yep, and we'll monitor that as they're doing it so they can make an appropriate connection and grout it back in and so on.
How much drainage are they going to put on that? Because that's not that big a tile at the west end. I think that's only a 12-inch tile up there in that last block.
Just to drain their parking lot, as they show here.
You might want to look and see if we can take any more on for that storm sewer out there, or we'll have to budget repairing or replacing our storm sewer from West Avenue on west to Catherine.
If they're currently pumping into it, you know, what size pipe and how much water are they being able to move into it when they do?
Smaller line, looks like a 3-inch drain line.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the mayor to sign application permit to occupy right-of-way for Persona, south side of Southwest First Street.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure, Chad, make sure that you stay on top of this one. Okay, thanks.
Okay. We are now past 5:35. We will go up to number 1. Hearing upon the petition for vacation of the street, a portion of Northeast 10th Street. Jen, did we get any signatures out there on anyone who wants to speak on this, or?
This is
I see.
public comment at the bottom. This is
Got
the
it,
agenda
got it.
item. Okay?
Yep.
Mr. Erickson.
I see Dick. Did you want to speak to it, please?
Well, just
Yes.
briefly, Your Honor.
Absolutely.
Thank you for allowing us to appear tonight. And I'd like to, before I forget, thank your finance officer, Jen and Chad, for their assistance in this. I think the petition was pretty straightforward. There's a right-of-way, 10th Street off Washington Avenue going over to North Lee that's never been opened, and most people don't even know it's right-of-way, but there's been, I think, some public input in the paper. I was talking to Stacy at the college about them wanting to use this new expanded parking, which is probably good for the city because it gets cars off the street and out of their own parking lot. So that's going to be part of it, and then there'll be, you know, more than likely future development between that area and the playhouse. So that's kind of the idea. That's what we're doing. I was told by Casey to make sure that it was reported that the sacred sledding hill on Prairie View Playhouse will remain, as will most of the trees, if not all of them. So he wanted to pass that along. So we'd appreciate your affirmative action on letting us vacate that street for that intended use.
Yeah, and for anyone who's been up there and looked at it, and that, it basically right now is a street to nowhere, a dedicated street to nowhere, because North Lee is not developed to connect to it anyway, you know. So, and then there's housing further to the west, you know. So it isn't a street that would be able to be utilized other than to drive in, drive out, if it were developed. So.
And the university owns property on both sides.
They do, yes.
And we're asking with Chad, it's right-of-way line to right-of-way line from Washington Avenue to the right-of-way line on North Lee as it extends.
Anyone else that wanted to speak on? If not, then we'll move to number 1, resolution number 2018-12, vacate a portion of a street, portion of Northeast 10th Street.
I'll make a motion we approve resolution number 2018-12, vacated portion of a street, portion of Northeast 10th Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
May I ask a
Discussion,
question?
yes.
We talk about a portion of that. Can you clarify what that is?
Well, it's the portion that's on the Dakota State campus,
Okay.
not east of town or further west. It's just that portion that's right there on between Washington. Yeah, yeah, just right there in that one. Basically, it's about one city block in length. So.
And it's also shown on Exhibit A. That gives a pretty good, clear depiction
Yeah,
of
and
where it's at.
I guess it was, the only thing that I wanted to be clear was that saying, we're not saying a portion of that section of the street.
The
We're
whole.
saying a portion of the, right?
We're
Doesn't affect
going
me at all.
from
It
Washington.
affects Washington, the 10th Street from the right-of-way line on Washington Avenue to the right-of-way line on North Lee Avenue. So it's just that right there. Doesn't
Basically-
affect Lee Avenue, doesn't affect Washington Avenue, just this little strip of land.
Yeah.
Because if you go up there and look.
Yep, no, I know what you're speaking of.
I'm glad to hear about the sledding hill. Won't be
I'll
affected.
pass it along.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
No.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing, number 2, hearing upon application submittal to USDA Rural Development Office. Chad, would you like to address this?
Yes, I can make a few initial comments, and actually, I may actually
Yes.
introduce Greg Mogg from First District and allow him to say a few things, and then I'll have additional information to add after that, if that's all right.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about the funding part of this? Okay, thank you. I will say a few things, and then Commissioner Corbin or Utility Director Lawrence, feel free to chime in as well as necessary. On June 25th, the Commission approved Banner Associates to create a preliminary engineering report for storage and distribution improvements for the City of Madison. That item was a prerequisite to an application for rural development funding. That report and that has been completed as of last Friday and submitted to rural development for their consideration. Also, early in the process, we had some coordination with First District, and who had assisted the finance office in putting in the notice for this hearing. And that's what we're having today related to this proposed project. The project has been discussed again with several people within the city. It had been related to the replacement of the water tower. I'll just hit a couple high points, and then I may backtrack and provide some detail. Replacement of the west water tower, and also replaced of some distribution lines in the system. We've identified some of those lines in some reports in the past, dating back to 2009, and then some follow-up reports as well, which we've identified some deficiencies in the system and the tower issues. The tower is 83 years old. It's at a different elevation, about 25 feet difference in elevation from the north tower or the northeast tower. A couple years ago, worked with the distribution system and the Public Works Department to implement 2 different pressure zones to do several things, among them being to keep the west tower on through the winter months and keep more water in the air and operate that tower through the winter months. It hadn't in the past due primarily to the elevation difference. And then as far as some distribution improvements, there are several different phases, about 7 phases identified in previous studies. We've been making improvements slowly and steadily to our distribution system since then. Among those things that we've tried to address were areas where there was a lot of water main breaks, where there's 4-inch water lines, and sometimes those overlap, sometimes they don't. And so these improvements we've been working at, it's just a slower pace. A lot of these lines are cast iron lines, maybe 40 to 60 years old, that are in need of addressing. So it came up recently in discussion with Commissioner Corbin that there may be some funds available through rural development to use WEP, and I'm not going to get the acronym right. It's one of the funding mechanisms through rural development for water funding. It's at a 3.125% interest rate and up to a 45% grant eligible for those improvements. There's been in the study that I talked about, Banner completed. They did some alternatives analysis and some population projecting and needs. It's recommended that a new tower to be a 750,000 gallon tower as opposed to the current 450,000 gallon tower. And then phases 3 and 5 were some phases that were identified in the report and included in the project description. I believe there's a map up here behind me, yes, you can see that. 3 would be the northeast part of town, and 5 would be the west part of town. So those lines were recommended in those previous reports, but in addition to that, in those same geographic boundaries, the 4-inch lines were also incorporated into the replacement schedule for this report that Banner completed. The application for the 750,000 gallon tower, the cost estimate for that was $3,161,000. And then for the distribution improvements, which includes a portion of the street above that, typically about 13.5 feet of width of the surfacing would be eligible for these funds from rural development. That's about $6.8 million for those improvements. As that discussion had continued, we had talked with First District and amongst ourselves about the replacement of the remainder of the streets, not just a 13.5-foot wide section of that. In recent times, as you all recall, we've tried to be very intentional about replacing the full surface of the street. Rural Development also has another funding mechanism, community facilities is what it's called. It's a different grant program. The funding, it's a different funding source. There's no grants available, but the rates are at 3.875% for those, and that's for the duration of the lifetime of the improvements. Typically, I think the maximum rural development would anticipate would be a 40-year loan, and certainly streets and any necessary curb and gutter and sidewalk would qualify for a 40-year replacement, and that's likely how the application will be submitted. Finally, if there's any improvements necessary in these streets as the scoping, again, should the project proceed here, but if there's any necessary improvements to any sanitary or storm sewer, we anticipate any of those, which would be minor, as the scoping continues, we will replace those 100% with local funds. There's no anticipated part of the application utilizing either rural development program for funding those. And so that, in a nutshell, and I'm sure there'll be more discussion about some of this information through the course of the remainder of this hearing, or if Brad or Jeremiah or anybody wants to fill in any blanks that I may have left. That I tried to hit on the project. Now, I'm not an expert in rural development. Of course, that's why we have the First District there and helping us with that. The application, there's some state funds available for rural development. There's a pretty tight window on the application. I believe it's July 16.
Next Monday.
And with the deadline, a subsequent notice back to us, I believe, I'll describe it that way for lack of a better term, by August 2nd or so. We hope to maybe hear something back from them. So there's sort of two deadlines, if you will, or two key dates related to that. So this hearing is necessary. The approval of these resolutions would be necessary for us to proceed in submitting the application. These are the next steps. And with that, I guess I'll pause for a minute and see if there's any parts that I may have missed or kind of glossed over or misstated.
One thing about the application also, and that is if Madison were to be granted some funds, and that it has to be completed within a 3-year period. We would point that out as well.
Yep.
So,
I guess I'd defer until we hear Mr. Mogg speak, and I'll touch on some things if he doesn't cover them. So.
Well, I was going to say Chad did a pretty good job.
Yeah, didn't leave much.
For me to answer here. I will answer one. WEP stands for Water and Environment Program. That's what WEP stands for. Yes, we are submitting applications now. They are loan applications is what we're submitting. And then rural development evaluates those applications. And in the case of the WEP application, as Chad and the mayor stated, under the rural development rules and their criteria, Madison is eligible to receive up to a 45% grant. But first thing they do is they take the application and they're gonna look at it, and they have to do their underwriting process. And so the first thing they're gonna do is they're gonna look at it and see how much loan you folks can afford, basically, is what they're gonna do. And then based on that underwriting, if there's any need for grant funds, then that's when they're gonna look at giving you grant funds, some typically an amount, not usually a percentage. So, under the community facilities, as Chad stated, streets, which are, normally there is some grant program funds available under CF, but streets are not eligible to receive grants under the CF program, so it's strictly Mullen that you're applying for there. As he said, 40-year term, actually on both of them, if you receive grant funds under the WEP program, it can be up to a 40-year term. Otherwise, if it's just strictly loan, it would only be up for the life cycle of the pipes or the facility or 30 years at that point. So as he says, we're trying to meet this 16th deadline. The state has funds that they receive, both loan and grant funds, that they have to turn back to the federal government on August 2nd. So that's the second deadline that he's talking about. So we need to get an application done by the 16th, submitted to them so that they can evaluate it and potentially give this project funding from the state funds that we got now. Because it's obviously, there's less competition for projects in South Dakota versus if we could, if we wanted to, we could go to the national pooling deadline, which is, I believe it's what, at the end of September, if I remember right. So we could actually go for funding at a little bit later date, but you're actually then competing nationwide at that point. So our best bet is to potentially get some grant funds, at least on the website of the program, is to remain with the state funds, try to get the application in here by the 16th. So, anything else?
I just had a couple things I'd throw in. Is we've gone through this process. Obviously, we've looked at our ability to finance and feel comfortable with that as we go forward with this application. And I think RD will come to the same conclusion that we have the ability to finance our portion of this project should we be given a grant. The thing about this is that we're dealing with public safety. The 4-inch lines don't provide as much fire protection, so this is a public safety thing, and it's something that it's very important for us to get the fire flowing. It'll also improve the quality of the water when we get down to have just one zone and have the mixing of the water instead of having the dead ends. So that's all really important to us. Probably the other thing that's real important for the citizens is this: if you've ever played poker, there's a thing called pot odds, and anytime there's enough money in the pot that you can get almost 2-to-1 on your money when you're going into it, that warrants you to try to get that. And that's kind of where we're at right now. If we can get 45% grant money, that's almost 2-to-1 on our money. That's something that makes it very enticing for us to try to go out and get. So that's why we're here today, is to try to make a bid, if you will, to try to get some money to shorten up our overall project length. If we do, I think they've changed the number a little bit in this last report, but we're at 59 miles of total pipe in the city, 40-something in cast iron, and we need to replace it all. If we're really, really successful and we can do, let's say we just did a mile a year, it's a 40-year project. This is an opportunity to shorten that up by doing 5 years or 5 miles basically in one project. And it's something that I think is an opportunity that we just can't walk away from, between the odds on the money and the ability to shorten up that overall project length. So I think it's very important for the city of Madison to move forward with this and apply for this. We can always decide how we want to go about it after the process is over. If it's not something that's in our best interest, we can, withdraw at that time. So there's no obligation whatsoever at this point moving forward, other than we're going to apply, see what we can get for a return on our investment of this time. Obviously, we did have the report that cost us some money, so it's not like it's a bet, a free bet. Just like in poker, you got to ante up. But in this case, we have an opportunity to get some really great pot odds, and I think we should really look at moving forward with this. So it's my recommendation to wholeheartedly accept this and move forward.
The other thing is we got to keep in mind in that, every time we have a water break, it's not cheap either. So, and along with those cast iron pipes and that, sometimes there are breaks in the middle, sometimes there are chunks that pop out. But it never seems to happen at an opportune time. We have had some breaks this summer, and that could be associated with the remodeling of the Center Street project, and every time we have to turn it off and turn it back on again, it creates kind of a sudden hit on the system. And so we've had at least 3 water breaks that I know of so far. And I don't think there's any more, but that's also a reason to upgrade the city as we can when we can, and when we can get a 2-to-1 or almost get help along the way. It's to the benefit of our citizens to do that.
This is largely based on the 2009 Banner study.
That's when we first created our water model at that time. And within that process, we took the opportunity, because we were studying the system, to identify any deficiencies, provide some capital improvement recommendations and such. And so those came about at that time, yes. And then we've used that list of projects since then, basically, to when we're able to do water projects, in addition to the needs identified by the public works folks. We also try to utilize these as well, so we've sort of had a combination. The public work folks have identified break areas, and this has also additional areas in it, so when we kind of marry them up, we do. Otherwise, we just go with the highest priority, and just sometimes we're not able to keep up with all the break areas. We'd like to focus more on the 4-inch line and some of these other lines that would help fire flows and such.
Is this map, is this 5 miles?
Just about.
Being here? Okay. Does that mean, and you're confident we'd be able to do this within 3 years? Provided we got, because you just mentioned we have to do this within 3 years.
That's a good question. This will be a significant amount of work, and we'll need help doing it.
Yeah.
What our latest thought process on that is, it would probably, and we believe this would work, we would break it up in a 2-year process. Probably some of the work that would happen in 2020, and potentially in 2019, and then some of it lingering that following year, late 2020 and 2021.
Whatever's left over.
Correct. Obviously, a break might be the 2 left and the right, if you will, or the east and the west.
Sure.
It'll be a big undertaking, I can tell you, bigger than we've ever done.
A lot of digging.
And particularly when you add the idea of redoing the entire streets. Now, I want to point out, and I mentioned it briefly, but we'll scope these and look into this, accomplish survey of these areas. That may identify some sanitary sewer, some storm sewer here and there, or maybe some of these lines will come off here and there because of another reason. Commissioner Thill had mentioned something a little bit before the group came in. He talked to me about something. So this is the max, because we've submitted this for environmental, and it's hard to add things. So it's not likely we'll be able to add to this. Very unlikely, potentially, but very unlikely. So that this may be reduced some, if anything, the map you see here.
Yep. Good way to do it.
But we want to get as much done as we can on this project, and we want to do what we have to. If we have to break it into, there's obviously 2 geographical areas. One obviously has a little more pipe than the other one. We could possibly break that into 2 separate projects and, get going with them at one time too. So that's the other thing we talked about today. The thing about it is, when you start putting that much asphalt on something, somebody will move a plant to town, and somebody will give us a pretty good price to be sitting here putting asphalt on our city streets. So I think that the pricing is going to come down from what, we hope it will, so it'll make it a little bit more affordable on us, because that's going to be coming out of a loan. So I think there are some economies of scale, so we'll have to play that as we go along. But we got to get through this first stage and see if we can get the application in, see if we can qualify for some grant monies, and make some decisions after that.
You said we couldn't add to this?
It's not easy. It's kind of, and it's primarily, Greg can help chime in too, but he has a lot of experience with rural development. Once you submit the environmental reviews and/or ask for the project or submit these applications, it's very challenging and to add to it for a variety of reasons, but one of which is just changing the scope. It's hard. They have a fair amount of review in this application process, and to do that midstream, if you will, after it's bid or even during the scoping project is challenging. If something becomes necessary or it looks like we should, we will, but or try. But the other thing we keep in mind, and we've talked about this with Commissioner Corbin and Director Lawrence, is that we're still going to try to have our regular ongoing projects at the same time. This is just a large infusion of investment, if you will, in our capital. So yeah.
You and I had talked about this big picture on North Summit the other day, remember? From north of 9th Street up that.
Correct. That's we're looking to do that actually next year before this project.
Okay.
With our traditional annual projects.
Okay.
The same with the south side of Dakota State University on 6th Street. That's in the works, if you will, totally separate from this project.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an important point. We're not going to be done after this project. It just kind of takes a pretty big bite out of it, but we'll still be having upgrade projects for years going forward.
And we'll continue on with the projects that we have scheduled in the 5-year plan simultaneous with this.
Yes. I mean, these busy years of construction, we may have smaller projects, as you can imagine, with the scope of work and effort that this is going to take. But absolutely, we're going to plan to continue to have projects on an annual basis, and it may not be smaller, but I'm anticipating, especially this first phase, that we want to get our legs under us a little bit and see how this progresses, and then keep the ball rolling on what we've been doing as well.
Other questions or comments?
Good find, whoever found out about this.
Well, we'll see.
Commissioner Corbin is the one to blame for this, so.
Yes, I'll if it goes poorly, I'll take the blame. If it goes well, there's a lot of people involved here, so.
No, this.
Jen, I guess I agree with this right now.
I do. Yep. It's been a great team effort so far. We're crunching a lot of numbers. We're doing the RDFI online, and we just have to see how this all falls out. What kind of grant money, what kind of loan, we're just where it all falls out. This is definitely though where we need to start. It's just to get your blessing to submit the application and move forward and see how it all falls out.
As financial officer, though, if the stars all aligned on this for us,
Yes, we're looking at some debt limit. We did some recalculation of debt limit. It needs to go back to my auditors, so we're comfortable there. So yes.
All right, if no other questions in that, we'll move on to number 2, resolution number 2018-13. Authorize the mayor or designated representative to submit the USDA Rural Development WEP application.
As Chad explained, we have 2 applications here. The WEP is for the water lines, and then the next one will be for the
Street.
repave the rest of the street, essentially.
I'll move that.
Okay, we have
First.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Resolution number 2018-15. Authorize the mayor or designated representative to sign the USDA Rural Development CF application. And this is the other half.
Same thing, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Oh.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, I'm going to move down to number 7 here real quick. Authorize the mayor to sign the agreement with the Lake County 2018-19 fuel agreement. And I did attend the county meeting in that when they were talking, and there's no changes in the costs in that for this next agreement. So, Chad, do you have anything to add to this? Jen?
The agreement is the same. We have,
Yes.
Again, you'll see this every single year, so the agreement verbiage is exactly the same. And correct, we were able to maintain the same admin fee as in years past, just the 8%, or excuse me, the 8 cents. FYI, I crunched the numbers here earlier today. Last year, so in 2017, the city did use 21,195 gallons of gas from the Lake County system, and then also 16,997 gallons worth of diesel. That admin fee there at the 8 cents per gallon cost us about $3,055.
And that basically is to take care of the, their expenses and things on the equipment that we use, keep it working.
It's been a good agreement. We've had it for a number of years.
It is.
I'll make a motion. We authorize the mayor to sign agreement with Lake County 2018-2019 fuel agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 4, authorize bidding of the AIP 3-46-0029-016-2018 Madison Municipal Airport Parallel Taxiway Project. And Chad is making that phone call right now.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just took the opportunity to invite Brian Jacobson with KLJ to participate. Hi, Brian. Chad Comas. You're in conference in the city commission meeting?
You bet.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was saying I just wanted to provide an opportunity for Brian to be available to answer any questions you may have regarding this matter as well. So, Jen, is this on? Or?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
You should be just fine.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I can start by just saying this is the airport project for the parallel taxiway that we've kind of contemplated for quite some time. And this starts the process of the advertising for bids. The information is there as to how many times we'll advertise and so on. And at the end of the day, the application, or we'll bid the project, and then there'll be the prices will be known, if you will, and then we'll make an application to the FAA based upon some of those bid prices. KLJ is poised to work them into the final grant applications, and then after we get the grant and the contractor, we accept the bid, we should be able to proceed potentially starting later this year. But Brian, would you fill in any voids that I left in that description?
Yeah, the only thing, the things that are included in the grant application are the construction of the project, which will be based on bids that Chad explained. And then also our construction administration and observation services. We will do the grant administration and oversee the project, basically on site and administer partial payments and verify that it's being constructed according to the plans and specs and all documentation is accomplished. Also, we will sub-consultant quality assurance testing required from the FAA project.
And then just for point of clarification, the funding on this, isn't it 90, 5, and 5?
Correct. It's 90% federal, 5% state, and 5% local.
And we have monies that have been set aside for this project, so the money is on hand from the city and that ready for this project to move forward.
Yes, we do have that in
Yes.
reserve.
We have for many years, haven't we?
Yeah,
Yes.
very diligently,
Yeah.
right,
Yes.
have kept that in reserve.
I believe right now, at least as of April, there was a briefing memo provided. At that time, the estimated, our 5% share was just over 220,000, and we had in excess of 300,000 in reserve. Now, there's been a few revisions to this project as requested by FAA. I haven't seen the latest numbers on those, but they would be less than what
We're
we...
still covered.
Correct, yes, sir.
Thank you.
And then anytime you can bid the scope in its entirety rather than in piecemeal, in that, we should have some savings in that, in getting the project done in one shot instead of 2 different times, so.
Indeed, and that was what was the briefing in April was. At that time, it was scheduled to be the taxiway built in 2 different years. Came before the commission that the opportunity presented itself to do both phases at one time, That's what we talked about in April, and that's where I gave you those numbers from earlier, so.
Anything else you have, Brian?
No, sir. We just want to proceed and get this thing out to bid and we'll finish up the grant application and move into the, the actual tangible of the project. This would be nice to see.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Bob, it's your area.
No. It's a goal for us, so,
Yeah, ready to rock and roll.
yeah.
I believe the airport board has been pretty well
Yeah.
briefed and
Yes.
kept up to speed on this, so.
Yes.
You know, we talked about it at the last airport board meeting, so.
And Brian, just for your information, this item is on the agenda, but then the other one, so don't hang up, the next one regarding the fee evaluation is on as well. Excuse me, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Because it's been many years in the waiting, probably dating back to my days on the airport board, I will make a motion, we authorize bidding of the AIP long number Madison Municipal Airport Parallel Taxiway Project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next one, authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with HDR Engineering Incorporated, independent fee estimate for the Madison Municipal Airport Parallel Taxiway Project. Chad, did you have any more to add to this?
I'll say a few brief things and then let Brian chime in, but basically this is as the name implies, an independent review of the proposed fees that KLJ will be submitting for their scope of work for the construction observation services that will be coming in the next couple weeks, I expect. And so this is a FAA requirement for another independent firm to review it. This $3,000, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, is also 90% grant eligible. Is that correct, Brian?
Correct.
And if you have anything, please add any more as well.
And, when the engineering fees are in excess of $100,000, this independent fee review is required. And so we're just following, for the guidelines and requirements of that they on the law.
And for point of clarification in that, with the 95.5, this would be a cost of approximately $150 to the city of Madison. The rest would be 90% and 5% by the state. So. Questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Make a motion, we authorize the mayor to sign professional services agreement for the Madison Airport Parallel Taxi Project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is our
Good night.
public comment period. Do we have anyone that?
That's it.
Not tonight? All right. Seeing no announcements, no executive session, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.